Mr. President, through the chair, I would like to inquire to my friend from Connecticut the relationship here between the tragedies we've seen far too often in this country, most recently in Orlando, but as Senator Murphy and Senator Blumenthal know all too well, in Newtown and Virginia Tech, and the list goes on and on. The work that we've done in order to protect our homeland from radicalization. I would like to ask you that you've been one of the leaders on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Murphy, and you worked very hard to make sure that we have the very best intelligence information to keep our country safe, to support law enforcement against terrorists, so that we do everything we can to make sure we identify those who could commit terrorist actions and take law enforcement action against those individuals. And Senator Murphy, the Orlando episode, we don't know all about it yet. We're still learning information about the perpetrator. But we know that the LGBT community feels particularly threatened by what happened. They were victimized at this particular spot. And Senator Murphy and Senator Booker and Senator Blumenthal, Senator Markey are on the floor, have all worked very hard to deal with the root causes of hate in our society, which is another factor concerning the safety in our communities. And I would like to get the connection here on the gun issues, but I think it's important to point out that we have worked very hard to support the LGBT community, to make it clear that all people in this country's rights are going to be protected. We have celebrated the Supreme Court decision that recognized marriage. We have celebrated some actions within our military to open up full participation by the LGBT community. We were particularly pleased with the recent confirmation that we saw taking place in our military with Eric Fannery. We have seen some progress in America, and globally we've seen some progress in regards to the LGBT community. We've seen in several countries, and I know I mentioned this specifically in asking the question to Senator Murphy because of your work on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but in Malta, Ireland, Thailand, Bolivia, Vietnam, laws have been passed to protect the transgender. That's all work we've done to try to keep all of our communities safe. Ukraine passed a law that repealed one of the workforce discrimination laws against the LGBT community. These are all important steps that we have taken to try to keep not only our community, but the global community safe from these types of hate acts. So we've taken some positive steps in trying to isolate terrorists and trying to make sure law enforcement has all the tools that they have. And we've done a lot of work to protect vulnerable communities to make sure that we stand for all rights for all people. So I applaud you and your colleagues and our colleagues for being here on the floor to talk about the relationship here, and this is what I want to ask you about, of why in the week following Orlando, you're on the floor talking about gun safety. I noticed that in the Orlando tragedy, one of the weapons that was used was an assault weapon, a military-style weapon. I must tell you that in my observations in Maryland, I don't know too many people who need to have that type of weapon in order to do hunting in my state or to keep themselves safe. It seems to be a weapon of choice by those who want to commit crimes. You've already talked at great length about terrorists, those on the terrorist watch list, and that loophole that exists. Or we could talk about what happened in your state with a high-volume ammunition clip that certainly added to the numbers of victims before law enforcement could deal with the perpetrator. So my question to you is, as we're looking at ways to keep Americans safe, How do you see these issues coming together? How can we have a coordinated strategy? And why haven't we acted?
I thank the gentleman for the question. I want to thank you for the work you've done as our leader on the Foreign Relations Committee to make LGBT rights not just a domestic priority, but an international priority for this country. And, I started this out about 3 hours ago talking about how complicated this attack was in Orlando and how many different competing influencers there were on the just incomprehensible decision that this individual made. But clearly he had a hatred in his heart for people in the LGBT community. And it's a reinforcement for us to pay attention to the words that we use, the things that we do, and the legislation that we contemplate or pass. That if we are building inclusive societies in this country and promoting, as you are, Senator Cardin, through the chair, inclusive societies abroad, then we give less room for individuals who might be contemplating these hateful actions against individuals that are a member of a minority group, LGBT, Hispanic, what it may be. And so I think our obligation here is multifold. We need to pass stronger gun laws. We need to take the fight to ISIS, but we need to double down on inclusive societies. We need to double down on fighting discrimination against our LGBT brothers and sisters, because to the extent that we make discrimination, we make hatred, we make malevolent thought much more of an outlier in our society, then we cut down on the potential for this to happen in the future. And I thank the gentleman for also bringing together all of these other things, all of these other potential steps forward on our gun laws. Of course, assault weapons should not be legal in this country. When they were prohibited for 10 years, we saw a diminution in the number of mass murders committed. Of course, these mega clips, the 30-round and 100-round clips, have no place in a civilized society. And I guess our hope is that if we start exercising this muscle of getting consensus on gun laws, if we start with background checks and the terror gap, which we know the American public is together on, and we know that we can find agreement in this body, then that will give us the platform with which to get agreement on some of these other issues. If we start finding common ground today, this afternoon, tonight, then we have the room to find more common ground in the future. But the gentleman is right. We have to link these efforts together. We have to understand how complicated the motivations were for the shooter, but we also have to understand that we are not powerless in confronting it. Yielding to the gentleman for a question.
And through the chair, just one additional question, if I might ask at this time. And that is, you pointed out, rightly so, that there is no one problem that we have to deal with, that there are multiple issues involved here. And I've heard some of my colleagues say, well, the problem's not the weapons that they use, or the problem's not the social issues, the problem's not this or that. But I would ask my friend from Connecticut, it seems to me that the one option that should be off the table, and that is doing nothing. It just seems to me that the American people are demanding, and rightly so, that we take action now to make our communities safer. And they, quite frankly, don't understand the inaction of this body. And quite frankly, I don't understand the inaction of this body. Would my colleague agree that the only option we should take off the table in trying to deal with this, or an option we should take off is doing nothing?